Lorenzo, thank you very much. Instead of making a comment or question to you, already we have received the number of questions from the audience. So I myself would like to add my own question, synthesized with a question from the audience. Already can you see it on the screen? Can you scroll down?
Yes, I can see them. Yes, yes, I'm
Okay, at
reading
this
them.
moment,
I'm reading
of
them.
course, the audience, you also still can continue to write down, but we have a limited time. So I just try to digest with what we have already received so far, but you can add and try to process as much as possible. But if you scroll down, Lawrence, we already have received
Yeah,
7 questions from
yeah,
audience. I can just just a couple, the sum of them together with into the one question. If you look at at least we can skip some of the question. For instance, the question 2. I'm sorry that there's
yeah,
somebody who the question 2, which has concerned the China, that has been already covered by your presentation. Seems like so. I would like to
yeah,
skip this. And the first question is about Africa and the Middle East. If you is it possible for Italy to become a neutral power in this region? Considering the history on the refugee and the migration issue, and its the geographical position. This is a first question you can answer a
yeah,
bit. And also the question 3 is it refers to the recent incident about the endorsement by the European community for the ratification of EU Mercosur FTA, but
yeah,
doesn't seem to concern the FTA per se, but rather whether this is because of the Giorgia Meloni's political skill or not. So it's a question is about Giorgia Meloni's political skill, not the FTA per se. And uh, I think that this question is related to the other question, which is the question 6. And
yeah,
question six is about primarily it's about the imbalance of power between the US and Italy.
hmm,
At this moment, as you presented, the Giorgia Meloni is trying to play a role or a bridge between the US and the European Union. But nevertheless, of course, obviously, Italy itself is not as big power as the US. So in this sense, partially because the Giorgia Meloni has its own kind of interesting character, she may be able to play a bridging role. So in this sense, the question 6 is related to the character of or personality of Giorgia Meloni. In that respect, you can couple together the question 6 and the question 3. And also, that you presented Giorgia Meloni is trying to cool down the kind of in the context of transatlantic diplomacy. But the kind of the effort of cooling down can be done by character, not by the country. I say, like if she is going to be replaced by somebody else as an Italian leader, he or she can do the same thing or not. We don't know. In that sense, our interest manifested in this question 3 and the question 6 is our curiosity about how much this Italy can do. It drives from the character of Giorgia Meloni or not. This is a question number 2. Number 3 is about the manifested numbers, the question 4. If you look at the question 4, it is about one of the weak point of Italy, which is a budgetary restraint. At this moment, it appeared to us that because Italy has been successful in economy is partly because of support by the EU recovery fund. So what if without it? You said that it's going to expire sooner or later. So afterwards, how is that Italy can handle your financial problem? And also, related to finance problem, my personal question is that given the budgetary restraint of Italy, how much you can continue to play an important role without the tremendous increase of the defense budget? So this is number 3. And number 6 is about the kind of a rise of the far right in the European politics. Why the French president, the election is going to be held next year. We are quite interested in the kind of whether the current trend we can observe of the political how should I say, the right-leaning trend in European politics will continue or not. And in that respect, in that context, Giorgia Meloni, whether she can play a larger role. Some people said, I read some article that Giorgia Meloni could be the successor of von der Leyen as a European Commission chairman. I'm not sure whether this is joke or serious, but anyway, we are quite interested in the kind of the future of the currently ongoing the right-leaning trend in the European politics. Maybe I stop here and I just pose 4 or 5 questions. So you can answer one by one even with some limited time. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. So I start from the one on the Africa and Middle East. I think that Italy is trying to develop good relationship with the Middle East. On this point of view, Meloni is following Trump's foreign policy line. Meloni maintained a very good relationship with Israel, and she's strengthening the ties as well with the Gulf monarchies. New round of investments will occur very soon in Italy by the Saudis, for example, and as well in Africa, what I was saying at the end of the presentation, we will have to assess in the following years with Meloni, or eventually as well without Meloni, how the Mattei plan would be capable to increase the Italian influence on Africa, and particularly related to energy infrastructures and managing migration. But I think that Italy, what Italy can do in the Mediterranean, looking at Africa and Middle East, is to play a role of stabilization. From this perspective, we have to consider Italy was the head of the European mission, for example, in the Red Sea, in order to contrast the Houthi, because that route is essential for the Italian economy. So I think Italy will continue to play, let's say, a first-rank role in the Mediterranean. Not in the rest, but in the Mediterranean, naturally, Italy, along with France, would try to play a major role. Concerning the Mercosur, what I would say is that, yes, Meloni proved to be very skillful, because in the past it was very difficult to avoid the veto role played by domestic farmers. She was able enough to assure to this constituency that they won't be damaged by these agreements. And at the same time, she was able to bargain with her allies to avoid, let's say, an opposition to the Mercosur. So I think would be very important for Italy, the ratification of the Mercosur and the enactment of it, because potentially there are very large markets where, Italian products can perform well. And as well, what you have to bear in mind is that in the Latin America, there's a very strong and very large community of Italian origins. Just think about Venezuela or, for example, Argentina and partially Brazil. So Italy can play a role of soft power as well. The first act in foreign policy made by Javier Milei was to obtain the Italian citizenship. So this is telling you something about the potentiality of this kind of agreement. Concerning the, let's say, economic policy and finance, I think that the major problem in the future will be to sustain the defense efforts, so to continue to increase the defense expenditure, and at the same time to try to develop new policies for the economy, particularly industrial policies. What I think is that without another European agreement would be very difficult for Italy to increase the level of expenditure, let's say, over 3% of the GDP. At the same time, it would be very difficult for Italy, let's say, to maintain a budget, fiscal stability without major political consequences if there won't be other European programs. So Meloni is working with her team in Brussels precisely to increase the level, let's say, of integration, at least on industrial policies and defense. So she maintained a skeptical approach on political unity, on political reform, but she's in favor of a further integration on industrial policy and defense policy. This was shown, and she played well a few weeks ago in crafting the agreement for financing Ukraine. You remember that at the very beginning, the proposal was to use the frozen fiscal assets of Russia, but Meloni was among the European leaders that helped to build up another solution, the solution based on the European debt for financing Ukraine, the 90 billion for Ukraine. So I think that this approach will remain. So from this perspective, what we might say is that Meloni needs, and broadly speaking, Italy will need a strong European policy, at least in the economic and industrial sector, to fulfill the promises on defense and as well to potentially grow more than today, or at least at the same level of today, without major political consequences. What I think is that this scenario is, let's say, more likely today because all the European countries are in these uncharted waters, both in terms of domestic policies and in terms of foreign policy. So what we might expect is a further cooperation and integration and finance by the EU in the industry and in the defense sector. We should assess at what extent this will happen and which might be the price, let's say, for the member states to achieve this. But this is for sure the strategy of Meloni's government. Meloni, despite she was a Eurosceptic, had a very clear, let's say, she has very clear in mind that she cannot she's dependent basically from the European Union at fiscal and economical level. So she won't contest, a further integration. The problem is that if this integration or this further development of new programs won't occur with the current fiscal rules, this might create problems at political level for Meloni, because for maintaining the credibility on the public debt, she could potentially be forced to reshape the balance and the budget, for maintaining a balance. So eventually to cut social expenditures or to cut subsidies. In this case, it might become difficult for her to maintain a strong level of consensus. So this is one of the main problems, let's say, in the following years. But for now, Meloni can arrive to 2027 election in a relative position of strength because the opposition is not particularly strong. There's not a strong leadership against her. And at the same time, all these funds will expire in the moment she's approaching the polls. So she can exploit this last year for propelling her narrative. Of course, after 2027, this might become a problem, not only eventually for Meloni. Yes,
Okay.
yes, these are more or less, all the others are touching these
Right.
points.
Related. Yeah. No. Thank you very much. We just have to wrap up sooner or later. Thank you very much for getting into you touched upon that industrial policy as well a bit in the context of defense and others. So
Yeah,
that this is question five more or less has been covered, and also there is another question from the audience about the economic security as question 11, which has been more or less covered when you
yeah.
talked about the relationship between the industrial policy and defense policy somehow. Do you want to add a little bit about the semiconductor and the critical mineral, the supply chain, the
Yeah,
resilience,
yeah,
if you like?
yeah. First of all, what I would point out is Italy is not a great producer of semiconductor, but of course, Italy is poor, broadly speaking, of critical materials and raw materials. So, as all the other European countries will try to develop new partnership in order to get critical materials from countries that would be other than Russia or China. I think that from this perspective, the government has a focus on this, but of course not specifically on semiconductor, more on energy security and food security. And of course, the African strategy is part of this, protecting the Red Sea is part of this, and developing IMEC as well is part of this strategy and this idea. So
Mm.
yes, these are the main points. One thing I would add is strategic value of Japan for Italy's point of view in comparison. Question 9 with France, Germany, or other allies. What I think is that all these countries should have interest in develop strong relationship with Japan. In the case of Italy, I think that the two countries, Italy and Japan, are quite complementary in the sense that, except very few, let's say, few niches of the economy, Italy and Japan are not competitors, but they can be integrated. And so, from this perspective, I think it's a valuable partnership precisely for this element that Japan is much more. Let's say much stronger in digital services, in technology, in robotics, while Italy is mostly focused on, let's say, traditional advanced manufacturing. And as well, the two countries have some similarities. Aged population, they share the similar constitution, similar influence of the United States. So there are many things that are making in the differences, of course, of these two very far countries, but there are some similarities that are connecting Italy and Japan compared to France or Germany. So from this perspective, I think would be valuable partnership.
Okay. Very nice way of wrapping up this session by having your positive message about the potentiality of the collaboration between Japan and Italy. Thank you very much. Already we passed the 9 a.m., the 5 p.m. in Tokyo time. Now it's time to close the seminar, and thank you very much, Lorenzo. Finally, the Lorenzo would like to be connected with the policy community and the business community in Japan more. So therefore, if the audience, anybody in the audience are willing to be connected with the Lorenzo as well, you can contact the Rieti so that we can give you the how to reach the Lorenzo. Thank you very much for the participation in our BBS seminar today. This concludes today's seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to you, Aki, and thanks to the VAT community. It's been a great pleasure to be with you.
Thank you.